things I like to do on my 2 days off of not recording, Friday and Saturdays. I like to stalk content creators on Instagram that I think are doing amazing things. And every once in a while, they say yes to coming on this channel. And we have the one and only Taylor Adams who said that just that, yes, and she's on the channel. How you doing, Taylor?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Do me a favor, let people know what your Instagram page is, and we're going to go into some of your posts because I really do think you're doing some amazing stuff.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes. So you can find me at Taylor Coleman Adams. I give all sorts of real estate investing tips, mom life tips, and anything that comes to mind.
There you go. Well, one of the ones I want to jump into right now is a series that you called I Retired at 31. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Steal My Financial Freedom Strategy. So I don't know if you remember this post. I have it up in front of me, but that's one I think we have to talk about. So,
Yeah.
retired at 31. I mean, slacker. I mean, what the hell?
Yeah, it was we had a plan to get here at 31, but who knew it would actually happen. So it's exciting to be here, and I was excited to put together a post to talk about what I did.
Yeah. So it sounds like this was a plan. So it was an accident.
Yep.
When
Yes.
did the plan start? Were you 17 or I mean, what the heck?
Yeah, so it did sort of start by accident. So back in
Okay.
2018, my husband and I started investing in real estate, and that was the accident. So
Okay.
we were both working in the city of Boston, and we wanted to buy our first home. We were looking at single families, but living close to Boston was very expensive.
Mhm.
So we were like, you know what? Why don't we buy a multifamily? We'll live in one unit, we'll rent out the other. Had no idea that was a house hack at the time. No
Wow,
idea what
that's
we were
awesome.
doing.
Yeah.
And we moved in and we were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I want to keep doing this. And because we live in such a high cost of living area, we were like, all right, we'll save up for the next 10 years and then eventually we'll be able to get the next property. But that
Right.
wasn't what we wanted. We wanted to spend more time together. We wanted to be able to work on a business that we could create and work on our passions. So that led to out of state investing.
Very, very cool. So again, 2018, so was it a duplex? I guess you house hacked a duplex, it sounded
It
like.
was. It was a duplex. That's right.
Okay. Was it just one tenant or were you doing them by the room in that second unit?
Yeah, so it was just one tenant, but
Okay.
we did alternate back and forth between doing a long-term tenancy
Oh,
and then short-term rental.
okay.
And I think we would have continued doing it as a short-term rental if the pandemic hadn't happened, and that kind of threw a wrench in our plans.
There you go. There you go. So I am curious because I have called house hacking the cheat code to wealth.
Yes.
It just is, right? You take your largest expense, X taxes, and reduce it, and in some cases, take it to zero.
Mhm.
It just is the cheat code. It allows you to start stacking cash faster. So when you did this, was half your mortgage covered by the tenant? Rough and tough? What kind of estimate are we talking?
Yeah, so about 75% of our mortgage was covered by the tenant. And the great thing for us, because we were living just outside of Boston, our rent before we bought was so high. I
Ah,
think we were paying like, $2,500 a month. And so the ability to be able to cut that in half and then be
yeah.
able to save so much was huge. So I completely agree. It's definitely the cheat code to wealth.
Very, very cool. And given the timing, I'm just going to random ask guess it here. You may have even had the opportunity to refi the loan, maybe in
Mhm.
21, and oh, by the way, increase your cash flow again, I'm guessing.
Yes, we did. Yeah, I think I think when we ended up leaving, we ended up selling that property, but before we did, I think our interest rate was like, oh my gosh, I think it might have even been below 3. I think it was like
Wow.
high twos.
Wow, that is awesome. All right, so you go from that. You're like me. You live in an expensive part of the world. I'm in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. Let's call you in Boston. Kind of the same deal, right? Not a lot of cash
Mhm.
flow where we live,
Yeah,
and we want cash flow because you don't retire on appreciation, retire on cash flow.
exactly.
So you probably looked around Boston a little bit. Didn't work. Didn't want to save for 10 years. What happened next? I mean, you just can't randomly pick a city. What'd you do?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was kind of funny. I ended up reading this article about this woman who was investing somewhere down south. I don't remember exactly where. And she was buying, like 4 or 5 families. And I was like, well, that's great. If you live in a cheap area, like I'm really happy for you, but I can't do that.
Right.
And it was kind of an aha moment for me where I was like, well, I guess why can't I? I guess I could do
Yeah,
the same thing. And so that led us on a little bit of a market analysis of trying to
sure.
figure out where we want to be. And one of the big things that we knew we wanted to be was not in an area that had snow, because we're very used to snow here, and we wanted to eliminate that expense as much as we could.
Yep.
And that kind of led us to the Sun Belt.
Mhm.
And once we got to the Sun Belt, we really narrowed down based on population growth, based on industry mix, and based off of the, just the ROI that we could get based off of the how low barrier to entry the price point was versus what
Mhm.
the rent was. And that led
Okay.
us to Tennessee.
Okay. All right. So Tennessee. So now you pick Tennessee. So this research of cities, I'm just going to guess kind of 5, 6 months of, hey, honey, what about this one? About this one? It wasn't overnight, I'm guessing.
It definitely wasn't overnight because we closed on our house hack in March 2018, and I think we closed on our first out of state property right before 2019. So it definitely took a little bit of time to figure out
As
what
it
we
should.
wanted to
You're
do.
not
Yeah,
gambling.
no.
Yeah, you're not gambling. Okay. So you go to Tennessee. The one thing that I think most people get wrong about out of state investing is, I'll just say it how I say it. They find a cheap market.
Mhm.
They don't find a team. Some of the
Yes.
people I speak with, and I'm very risky right now. They don't even go to Tennessee. They don't even go to the market. So, Taylor, did you and your husband actually fly to Tennessee?
We went once.
Okay. Well,
So
that's more than most.
we did. So what we did was, I'm completely on board about a team. It is incredibly important with out of state investing. Without your team, you're nothing. We're 900 miles from that market. So how the heck would we do a lot of the things we didn't if we didn't have a team? So what we did is once we decided on a market, we started looking at agents and property managers because we
Hmm.
knew that for our first foray into out of state investing, we did want to do a property manager. That's
Okay.
changed down the line, but initially we wanted to do that, get our feet wet. So we found an agent who was also a property manager, flew to Tennessee. We met with him. He like put a map out in front of us and he was like, all right, like this is a good area that you can look in. This is an area I wouldn't recommend. And he brought
Nice.
us to all the different areas. And so we really felt like we had a good feeling about where we wanted to invest after speaking with him.
So in my vocabulary, you created a buy box, right? Because Tennessee is yay big, even a city
Mm-hmm.
is yay big. He's saying, hey, here's your circle, to use your example, like,
Yep.
and you stayed in that circle. I'm guessing you didn't
Mm-hmm.
deviate.
Correct. Yep. So for our long-term rentals for that first couple years, we really stayed very true. We focused on Memphis, Tennessee, and we just went kind of deep on that until about 2021.
Okay. So now you're there. You close. You find Tennessee. You find Memphis. You do the work. What were you shocked at the price points and rents? I mean, you were. It was probably eye opening, right, from
Oh
Boston.
my gosh. Oh, it was crazy. So we had our house hack was cost us $625,000. And our first property that we bought in Memphis was $65,000. And so we were like, how is that possible? And I mean, the crazy thing too was that we were charging about $2,000 for rent from our tenants, and we were charging the tenants in Tennessee like $900 a month.
Oh,
And I was like, how does that, like, that seems very close, seems very similar for such a low price point.
right. Yeah. Well, again, the price is 10x, but the rent's only half, so that's a pretty good
Exactly.
equation. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. So how'd you finance the first out of state? So 65 grand, you were probably right on the cusp of an 80/20 loan, kind of just a standard 80% LTV.
Exactly. So we did 20% down, which was about $13,000 on that first property. The second property was a 5 unit. So we kind
Oh,
of
nice.
delved into more of the commercial, slightly commercial
Yeah.
with a five.
It's always funny, right? Why is five commercial and four is not? I don't get it, but whatever.
Exactly. And so we did a 25 down
Yep.
loan on that one. But once again, it was only $120,000 for a 5 unit. So it was like
Yeah.
still
Very.
not that much money.
Yeah, no, very, very cool. So let's continue the real estate journey because, again, I've stalked you on Instagram. At some point, you go from long-term rentals to short-term rentals.
Yes,
So let's talk
exactly.
about that transition. Why? How comes? What's that all about?
Yeah. So, when the world shut down in 2020, my husband and I were actually diving into syndication a little bit. We were going to be
Mm.
the GP on a 125 plus unit deal. And we had a property under contract. World shut down, and we were in due diligence, and we realized that they had misrepresented the vacancy rate. And so we
Yep.
backed out of that deal, and we were like, all right, the world's gonna be shut down for 2 weeks. We'll figure it out after 2 weeks. Obviously, we know that's not what happened. So
Right.
we were like, we need to figure out, what the heck are we doing? Well, are we happy doing the things that we're doing? Are we on the right path?
Mm.
And so because I was 5 months pregnant with my daughter at the time, I renovated our our whole house hack, and we were like, we need to get to our goal faster. We want to retire faster. We want to spend more time with our daughter that is coming into the world very soon. And so what we did is we turned over our entire original portfolio and we reinvested into short-term rentals to increase our cash flow.
Okay. So I'm guessing based on that, you did 1031 exchanges, I'm guessing?
So we originally planned on doing a 1031 exchange, but we had some challenges with our properties being in the LLC and wanting to be able to
Ah,
use a 10% down second home loan.
got it.
So we ended up not doing a 1031 exchange, but it ended up being okay.
Yeah, yeah. So you basically make a decision at this point to get out of long-term rentals. You sell your 7, 8 units that you have, including Boston, it sounded like?
We did. Yep. We sold our first house hack and we actually bought a second house hack that we live in now in an area that just made more sense for us and our lifestyle and, our
Still
growing
Boston, or
family.
did you move states?
We're still in Massachusetts, but we're a
Okay.
little bit more on the North Shore now.
Okay. All right. So you stayed kind of relatively local. And then short-term rentals, are you still in
Yeah.
Tennessee or did you go somewhere else?
Yes. So we started in Tennessee was our first one because we were very familiar with Tennessee and we were excited about that. And then the future one that we purchased was in Texas, in Crystal Beach, Texas. So we're excited to kind of diversify markets a little bit and do something that will help us, as the markets shift and evolve.
Yeah. One of the things that I don't know if you've seen it in my content, I'm very nervous about Airbnb and short-term rentals because I know it can be done right, right? If
Hmm.
you're on the water, if you have a unique property, there are amazing things that will always be great. But Taylor, there are so many people that down selected quality. They went a mile away from the attraction. It's on a busy
Hmm.
street, right? Short-term rentals became the latest easy button and get rich quick. And that's going to
Yes,
burn a lot of people. So what do you
absolutely.
see out there? Because there's a lot of people that are doing it wrong.
Yeah, and it's such a good point. When we were going into our short-term rental journey, we were really focused on using agents who were experts in the markets that we were purchasing properties in. And I think that's one of the things that people overlook is like, oh, I'll just use any agent. But you really need someone who's a specialist. And so when we were purchasing in Crystal Beach, for instance, we were looking at these properties and the price points in some of the areas were like, oh, this is great. Look at this. It's cheap over here and the returns look really good. And our agent, she put her foot down and she was like, absolutely not. You have to be on this side of the highway or it's not going to
Exactly.
work. And you
Exactly.
you you just got to take the expert advice. Like I can't be an expert in every market. I can't be an expert in every single detail. I'm not living it every day like an expert agent is. So really, once again, relying on your team, it's so important.
Yeah. And again, I've used that exact example, right? The freeway. It makes a big difference, right? I've seen people go,
Yes.
hey, it's only over the freeway. It's only 5 minutes. It's only like, no, you don't understand. In a world that is not 2021, where every Airbnb is full because nobody wants to go to hotels, this
Hmm.
isn't going to end well. And
Yes.
and then you get cities that are coming. You have to have a location that is short-term rental friendly, and their beach
Yes.
communities are friendly.
Hmm.
Mom and pop neighborhoods,
Exactly.
not so much.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. One of the big things that I focus on with short-term rentals, and I always tell people when they're interested in getting into it, is find an established vacation market because it's really hard to impose regulations on an area where that's their entire economy.
Yes,
You
their
know, when
tax
we
base. Yeah.
Exactly. When we had our short-term rental inside of our house hack, that's what happened to us. You know, we had a regulation that was put into place because of the pandemic that made it so we couldn't do it anymore. And that luckily that wasn't our plan. And so it wasn't a big deal. But if you're buying and your plan is to have it as a short-term rental, you're in a tough spot.
Yeah. So let's get back to this plan of retiring at 31. You
Yes.
essentially, now I want to be clear. Did you retire at 31 or did husband and you retire at 31?
Both of us. So my husband retired in,
Oh,
yeah, my husband retired in August.
all right. So what are kind of the big, because you did that in what, 4 years, 5 years,
Yeah, just
roughly?
under 5 years. Yep.
So slow. It's terrible.
I know we should have done it faster.
Yeah, come on. But what are the big steps, right? You're going from an accidental investment property in a duplex in Boston, and 5 years later, just under 5 years later, you're both financially free. There had to be
Hmm.
some big steps to help
Yeah.
people. And it's not always buying more units. Maybe it's saving money.
No.
Maybe it's this or that. What are some of the big steps?
Absolutely. Yeah. So some of the big things that we focused on were one, having a really well-established emergency fund. You just never know what is going to come up, and we've had a lot of actually big emergency fund needs in the last couple months, and thank goodness that that was a big strategy for us. So one, doing that. Two, looking at what are we currently making in cash flow and what are we projected to make in cash flow. What is the absolute minimum number that we have to hit every month, every year to meet our minimum base expenses?
Okay.
And if we're not going to be able to hit those base expenses, what are we going to do on top of that? Are we going
Mm,
to start another side hustle? Do we have a plan to increase our units? Because for us, reaching this financial independence number was kind of a step along the way. My husband
mm.
and I were joking about this yesterday, and we were saying, you know, financial independence for us was kind of like 25% of the way there. It was like the
Ah,
stepping stone to get us to where we
yeah.
want to go in the future so that we could spend more time working on the things that we wanted to do, growing our investment portfolio, growing other types of businesses.
Very cool. Well, let's talk about that now. So now that you're here, your daughter's here. What do we do? What do you do in the next 5 years, Taylor?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited about the next 5 years. So, so we definitely want to increase our STR portfolio and use that cash flow to diversify into long-term rentals. Diversification, obviously, very, very important as the markets ebb and flow. My husband and I are really, really interested in glamp grounds and motels. I foresee that in the next, I'm going to say, year to 18 months. And then in end of 5 years, we're really hoping to buy land because we want to build a vineyard. We want
Ah,
to start a vineyard. That's the goal.
yeah,
That's one of the big goals.
you know what you want. That is awesome. Now, I don't know anything about vineyards in Boston, but I'm guessing it's not in Boston. I'm just guessing.
Yep, it would definitely be on the North Shore, somewhere close to where we are now. You
Yeah.
know, breweries around here are so popular, and there's a couple vineyards around here that do super well. And we feel like we have an idea for like the missing link, and we're super pumped.
So I want to kind of close this conversation the last 10 minutes around if you're in a relationship and you're, 25, 28, 30, something like that. Um, and you want just a sliver of what you and your husband have already accomplished. Where do people start?
Yeah,
Where do people
yeah.
start?
You know, something that my husband and I we still do this every year, and we started doing this by having an annual meeting where we sat down and we figured, you know, who do I want to be in 10 years? What do I want to be doing? What do I want our lives to look like?
Wow.
And it started kind of small that way, where we
Sure.
met annually, and then it turned into quarterly. And now we do an annual retreat where we go away and we talk about this. We treat our life a little bit like a business, honestly. But I think taking little moments for us in the morning, every morning before my daughter wakes up, we sit down, we have coffee, and we just talk about our dreams and our goals and what we're going to work on that week and what does the next
Wow.
year look like for us. I think just like keeping that
Front
momentum
and
and that
front of
conversation
mind.
open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I have to tell you, I don't know many couples that have that daily, I don't know, habit.
Yeah.
That's refreshing. Talk more about that. Cause again, that 10 or 15, it doesn't have to be a lot,
No,
7, 8, 10 minutes, check in with each other. Cause you are the unit before the day gets crazy. I think that's,
exactly.
that's a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah, and I feel like every morning it really sets us up for success. So, we wake up, I make my husband and I a coffee, and we sit down and we just like we just kind of brainstorm and kind of like check in with each other and see where we are. Because the biggest thing for all of us is mindset. If
Right.
your mindset isn't in a good place, then you're not going to be able to move forward on your goals. You're not going to be able to achieve any of the things that you want, and enjoy the journey while you're there. And so by
Yes.
checking in and really understanding where that person's head at is at that day really helps us to just like be able to rely on each other and support each other when we're going through those ebbs in
Mhm.
the mindset. So that's
Yeah.
how we like to tackle each day.
I'm going to ask this question. I didn't know I was going to go here, but my mind just did. So obviously, you're very it's working, right? You and your husband, this
Yes.
daily check-in, which I love, but that's not natural. Not a lot of people do that. So were you do we owe your parents a shout out here for kind of giving you that mindset, or where did that come from?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great question. I think both sets of our parents have really, I mean, they were really great example relationships for both my husband and I. My dad and my mom, because of my dad's career, they've kind of spent a ton of time together, and so I always have watched them communicate with one another. And so for me, having someone who can easily communicate how they're feeling, how their wants and their needs for the future and our goals and our life together, I think has always been really important. And I think it's the same for my husband. And so we just
Yeah.
happen to find that.
How about let's close on this topic of money, right? Because money is a dirty
Yeah.
word for a lot of families.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think it's something you and your husband are comfortable talking about.
Hmm.
But was money talked about? Was it a stressor? Was it something that was talked about when you were growing up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes and no. I grew up. My father was the general manager of a tennis and social club in a very wealthy area, and so I was always surrounded by people who had a lot of money, and we worked for them. And so it kind of was like an unspoken thing when it came to money. And I didn't realize until I got a lot older, around a lot of my money blocks that I had were related to how I was growing up. My 2-year-old is making a lot of noise up there all of a sudden.
That's okay.
And so that um, that led me to understand kind of what my limiting beliefs around money were.
Yeah.
Once I got a lot older into my 20s.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Taylor, you have an amazing Instagram page. Let's plug it one more time because if people just go follow you now and just go through your history, it'll be helpful.
Yeah.
And do you put out stuff every day?
I try to 5 days a week on Instagram and then 3 times a day on TikTok. It's been a little
Wow,
a little
very cool.
wild.
Very cool. Well, what is your Instagram page? Because that's where I follow you, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at Taylor Coleman Adams. I am there every day, posting in stories and just talking about the challenges and successes of being a real estate investor.
There you go, folks. Do me a favor. Follow her today. Send her a note that you came from one rental at a time so she knows her time was worthwhile. Taylor, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.